Hi everyone. So I know that a lot of you are concerned about the coronavirus in your country. So I wanted to give you a quick update on how South Korea is dealing with it because I do think that South Korea was among the countries that began dealing with the coronavirus very early on, simply because of its geographical location next to China. But South Korea has actually had some, I think, some success dealing with the coronavirus. So let's just look at some of the statistics very quickly. This was last updated on March 28th, 2020. So it's today, very recent. Now, in total, there have been 9,478 corona cases, total cases of coronavirus in South Korea. Of the total number, there have only been 144 deaths. So the death toll in Korea is actually much less than, say, the United States, that has only been recently dealing with the coronavirus, and yet there are already 1,000 people who have died from it. Now, of the people who have become sick with the virus, we have 4,811 people have made a full recovery. So if we look at this over here, we can see that if you actually check this out, and I'll be showing the statistics later, the number of active cases continues to drop while the number of closed cases continues to rise. So what that means is that more people are making a recovery from the virus than people who are getting sick from the virus. So right now in Korea, there are currently 4,523 actively infected current patients. So what that means is these are people in the hospitals, or these are people who are getting tested and getting sick. But this number is going down. This is the number of registered sick people. Now, of that number, 99% of them are only in mild conditions. So what that means is that most of these people, if not all of them, will be making a full recovery from the coronavirus. So perhaps not full, but they will be recovering from the virus. They will be able to continue with their day-to-day lives. Only 1% of this is serious or critical condition. So this number 144 may increase slightly, but it won't increase by much. And this number currently infected patients will continue to drop, and I'll show you the trend later on. In terms of closed cases, these are people who've made a full recovery. 97% of closed cases have made a full recovery, right? They've recovered or they've been discharged. There have been 144 deaths, as I mentioned before, so 3%. Now, if we look at the total number of cases, so if you look at this daily new cases in Korea, you can see that it was trending upward up until about March 3rd. After March 3rd, and I think the peak over here was 851 people in a single day were sick, got infected with the virus. But after about March 3rd, it began to trend downward. You had some spikes, but ultimately it was beginning to trend downwards as the Korean government began to have some control over the situation. And again, same with active cases. You can see it was trending upward, trending upward, trending upward. And then finally around right here, March 12th, I think it peaked on March 11th, and then it just began kind of trending downwards, the active cases. So total deaths continue to rise. This is total. It's not about, this is not a trend you can really look at. But if you look at daily deaths, this is partly problematic as it's not really trending in any direction. It almost seems to be trending upward. But if you look at newly infected again versus newly recovered in South Korea, again, you had this kind of trending upwards, and then it just took a huge dive around March 7th or so, and it began going up. And then the number of people recovering began to go up drastically after this. So again, look at this outcome of cases, recovery versus death. I showed this to you earlier. But just, you can see a trend. It kind of, the death rate was increasing. And then around March 3rd or so, March 2nd, March 4th, it began to just take a huge dive. So South Korea is beginning to really recover from the coronavirus. Now in South Korea, for example, it's canceled many flights to major countries. It's also limited the current number of flights that are allowed entry into the country and allowed to leave the country. But how did South Korea deal with this? So there's a couple things that South Korea did that I think put the country in a position where it was able to deal with it. So the South Korean government, prior to the coronavirus even really coming to South Korea, the South Korean government was immediately aware of this. I mean, it already had people being tested. It had testing kits. It had ventilators. It had basically disinfected sprays going throughout the place. For a little while, South Korea was closed down. Restaurants, schools, everything like that was closed. Public facilities are still closed. So, for example, schools are still closed, but most private businesses are open. That includes restaurants, movie theaters, gyms, etc. But they did close it down a little bit. And while things were closed, You had people just going out onto the street, workers going out onto the street, just basically disinfecting the air, disinfecting surfaces, disinfecting everything. So that was number one, right? The South Korean government took immediate steps. They did testing right away. They had the testing kits immediately ready to go right away, but also they took it seriously and made sure to disinfect as much as they could. Number two, let's talk about face masks. So in South Korea, some of you guys may not know this, but there is actually an issue with air pollution in South Korea, partly because it's located so near China. And in South Korea, it's actually very common for people to wear face masks as a way to prevent themselves from breathing in the polluted air. So when the coronavirus came to South Korea, people were already wearing protective surgical masks, protective face masks in order to filter out the air. This, however, also had the added benefit of being able to prevent people from breathing in the coronavirus in places like subways and other places. So when you're walking around in South Korea, it's actually very common to see people wearing face masks, wearing surgical masks, in order to prevent themselves from getting sick from breathing in the polluted air. This is especially true when you go into subways, because people in South Korea are already afraid of getting sick from a variety of different things. You'll typically see people wearing face masks in subways, and this was prior to the coronavirus, right? And subways are obviously places where people congregate, where you're very close contact with other people. So simply the current climate of South Korea, the culture of South Korea, as well as the air pollution in South Korea, already led people in South Korea to be taking measures that would prevent them from getting sick. So when the coronavirus came to South Korea, it wasn't able to spread as easily. This slowed down the spread. So face masks being already widespread throughout the country really helped. Number three, one thing that I think is, I don't know how available it is or how widespread it is in the West yet, but since the coronavirus, guys, hand sanitizers are everywhere in this country. I kid you not. Like, look, washing your hands is a must, of course, but a lot of times, if you're outside for a couple hours, I mean, you're probably not going to go to the bathroom every hour, every 2 hours to wash your hands, right? In South Korea, guys, there are hand sanitizers everywhere. They're at the convenience stores. They're at the subways. They're at the restaurants. They're at the banks. They're at the gyms. They're like, you can go to a bus station and there's hand sanitizers everywhere. You can go to the subways and there's hand sanitizers everywhere. It's so convenient. Like, it's like every hour or so, if I'm outside for more than a couple hours, every hour or so, I'm washing my hands. One thing you should know about South Korea, however, is that no one is self-quarantining here. People are still pretty much walking the streets. The government hasn't the government hasn't enforced any sort of self-quarantining law or any sort of self-quarantining procedure, simply because the South Korean government began taking steps so early to help combat the virus that it's not necessarily a must for people to self-quarantine. Are there people who do that? Yes. At the very beginning, did the South Korean government recommend that, hey, you shouldn't be too active? Yes, they did. But if you walk outside, the streets are littered with people. Everyone is wearing a face mask, and I mean everyone is wearing a face mask. And despite people walking around, the number of cases, number of people being infected with the virus are going down. Now, am I saying that you should ignore self-quarantining in your country? Absolutely not. If you're in the West, you need to self-quarantine. You need to do everything that the health professionals are recommending. I'm simply talking about South Korea. South Korea is a different example because the South Korean government began taking steps extremely early in order to combat it, right? In the West, unfortunately, they didn't take steps very early. I think they still don't really have, up until recently, they still didn't really have testing kits. I don't even know if in the United States if they do have testing kits. In the United States, if you want to get tested for the coronavirus, you have to go to the hospital, which is extremely problematic. In South Korea, you had testing kits all over the place. So this is just something I wanted to share with you guys. I know a lot of people, are acting like this is the end of the world. I've definitely seen those people who think that this is some sort of judgment day. Guys, there's no need to panic shop. There's no need to, go crazy. Things will probably be bad for another month or 2 months or so, especially if you're living in North America or in Europe, but it will get better. So if you're living in North America, and my family is in Canada, what I would recommend, what I would want to let you know is that it's not going to get better for at least a month, simply because there are so many people who are already being infected, and because the government was kind of caught with their pants down. It's going to be a while, so expect schools to be closed, expect many public facilities to be closed. I don't know how long private institutions, private businesses are going to be closed for, but you can expect that. But in South Korea, you know, South Korea's made a huge recovery. China's already made a huge recovery as well. Many of these countries have made huge recoveries because of the early steps that they took to the virus. Unfortunately, in the West, they didn't take these steps. They didn't have the equipment. They didn't have the testing. They didn't have the ventilators, which led to the virus spreading increasingly rapidly. But in terms of things like panic shopping and just, you know, doing crazy things, guys, don't panic. You know, you got to remember that if you panic shop, you create another crisis, right? You're creating a shortage crisis in the midst of the coronavirus crisis. So, you know, just look out for yourself, look out for your family, look out for your community. You know, stay home, self quarantine, but understand that, you know, you're gonna get through this. And I'm hoping that maybe this video, you know, seeing that other countries are beginning to effectively recover from this, will help any of you with your anxieties or concerns or your fears or anything like that. And I hope you found this video at least somewhat informative. So thank you for watching and have an awesome day.